Ozzy Osbourne has screamed at crowds of 100,000. He's bitten the head off a bat. He survived overdoses that should have killed him 3 times over. But on a cold Tuesday night in Manchester, standing before 20,000 roaring fans, the Prince of Darkness did something no one had ever seen before. He broke down and sobbed like a child. It wasn't the drugs. It wasn't the fame. It wasn't even the decades of chaos that had nearly destroyed him. It was a single sheet of paper, a letter, written by a dying boy who would never live to see his 18th birthday. This is that story. Baky was 17 when the doctors told him he had 3 weeks to live. Maybe less. The cancer had spread through his body like wildfire. His lungs, his liver, his bones. The Pakistani teenager lay in his hospital bed in Manchester, watching the rain streak down his window, knowing he would never see another spring. But Baky wasn't thinking about death. He was thinking about Ozzy Osbourne. While other kids his age were obsessing over TikTok and Instagram, Baky had spent his final months listening to Black Sabbath on repeat. When the chemotherapy made him vomit until there was nothing left, he'd put on Paranoid and scream along until his throat was raw. When the pain in his bones felt like fire, he'd blast Iron Man and imagine himself as something indestructible. Ozzy doesn't know fear, Baky told his mother one evening as she helped him sit up to eat. When he screams, it's like he's screaming for all of us who can't. His mother, Fatima, had watched her son transform over the past year. The quiet, bookish teenager who used to study engineering had become something fiercer, something unbreakable. Even as his body failed, his spirit had grown louder. "I want to write him a letter," Baky whispered that Tuesday night, his voice barely audible over the steady beep of his heart monitor. "To who, Beta?" Fatima asked, smoothing his hair. "To Ozzy. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to." Baky's hands shook as he gripped the pen. The morphine made his thoughts fuzzy, but he fought through it. He had something to say and time was running out. It took him 3 days to write 4 paragraphs. Each word was chosen carefully, each sentence crafted between waves of nausea and moments of clarity. The nurses would find him at 3 a.m., hunched over the paper, tears streaming down his face, not from pain, but from the effort of pouring his soul onto the page. The letter was simple, raw, honest. "Dear Mr. Osbourne, my name is Baky. I am 17 years old and I am dying, but I am not writing this letter to make you sad. I am writing because you have given me something the doctors never could. You taught me how to be loud when the world wanted me to be quiet. When the cancer started eating me alive, your music became my armor. When I was too weak to stand, Shot in the Dark made me feel invincible. When the other kids at school started avoiding me because I looked like a ghost, Crazy Train reminded me that being different isn't something to hide from. I know you'll probably never read this. Famous people get millions of letters, but I needed to tell you that every time you screamed on stage, you were screaming for kids like me. Kids who are fighting battles no one can see. If I could have one wish before I die, it would be to tell you in person, you saved my life every single day, even the days when I didn't want to be saved. Thank you for teaching me that warriors don't always win, but they never surrender. Your biggest fan, Baky. P.S. Keep being loud for the rest of us." When he finished, Baky folded the letter carefully and handed it to his favorite nurse, Sarah. She was a 28-year-old who had been caring for him since his first day in the oncology ward. "Can you help me get this to Ozzy Osbourne?" he asked quietly. Sarah read the letter twice, her eyes filling with tears. "Baky, I can try, but celebrities get so many—" "I know," Baky interrupted gently, "but maybe if enough people see it." That night, Sarah took a photo of Baky holding his letter. He was painfully thin, his skin pale as paper, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. She posted it on Twitter with a simple caption. "This brave soul has one final wish. Please help us get this letter to Ozzy Osbourne. #, letter for Ozzy." She expected maybe a few retweets from friends. What happened next shocked everyone. The post exploded. Within 6 hours, it had been shared 15,000 times. Rock radio stations picked it up. Celebrity accounts began retweeting. Metallica shared it. Iron Maiden's Bruce Dickinson posted it to his Instagram. Even Sharon Osbourne's verified account retweeted it with a simple message. Reading this now. But it was the comments that made the difference. Thousands of people sharing their own stories. Ozzy's music got me through my father's death. Black Sabbath saved me from suicide. This kid gets it. Metal isn't just music, it's survival. The hashtag Letter for Ozzy became trending worldwide. News outlets picked up the story. Within 48 hours, it had reached Los Angeles. Sharon Osbourne was having coffee in her Beverly Hills home when her assistant burst in holding a phone. "Sharon, you need to see this," she said, showing her the viral post. Sharon read Baky's letter 3 times. Her hands began to shake. Without a word, she walked into Ozzy's studio, where he was tinkering with guitar riffs. "Ozzy," she said quietly, handing him the phone. "Read this." Ozzy squinted at the screen, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. As he read, his expression changed. The playful grin faded. His shoulders tensed. When he reached the final line, "You saved my life every single day," his hands began to tremble. He sat in silence for a full minute. "Bloody hell," he whispered finally. "This kid, he gets it, doesn't he?" "What do you want to do?" Sharon asked. Ozzy looked up, his eyes red. "I want to call him, right now." It took the hospital staff 20 minutes to set up the call. Baky was awake, barely, when the phone rang in his room. Sarah answered. "Is this Baky Sari's room?" came a voice she recognized immediately from decades of rock albums. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Yes, this is... Are you...?" "It's Ozzy, love. Can I talk to the kid?" Sarah held the phone to Baky's ear. His eyes fluttered open. "Baky?" came Ozzy's voice, gentle and careful. "It's Ozzy Osbourne. I got your letter, mate." Baky's eyes went wide. Tears immediately began streaming down his face. You read it?" "I read it, and I cried like a baby," Ozzy said honestly. "You wrote something that reminded me why I started singing in the first place. To give voice to people who feel voiceless." "I can't believe you called," Baky whispered. "Listen to me carefully, son," Ozzy said, his voice stronger now. "I've got a show in Manchester tomorrow night. I'm going to read your letter to 20,000 people. The whole world is going to hear what you wrote. Is that okay with you?" Baky closed his eyes, smiling for the first time in weeks. Yeah, that's okay." "And Baky?" "Yes, sir. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Don't you forget that." After they hung up, Baky turned to his mother, who had been crying silently in the corner. "Mama," he said softly, "I think I can die happy now." The Manchester Evening News Arena was packed beyond capacity. 22,000 fans had come to see the Prince of Darkness perform, but no one knew they were about to witness something unprecedented. Ozzy performed his usual set list with his characteristic madness. He jumped on speakers. He screamed until his voice cracked. He commanded the stage like a man possessed. But those who knew him well could see something different. There was a weight in his movements, a purpose beyond the performance. As the concert neared its end, instead of launching into his usual closing song, Ozzy walked to center stage. The band stopped playing. The arena lights dimmed to a soft blue glow. "I want to do something different tonight," Ozzy said, his voice carrying clearly through the massive sound system. "A few days ago, I received a letter from a young man here in Manchester. His name is Baky Sari. He's 17 years old and he's dying of cancer." The arena fell completely silent. 22,000 people held their breath. "This young man wrote me something that broke my heart and put it back together at the same time," Ozzy continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "And I think all of you need to hear what he has to say." Ozzy began reading. His voice was steady at first, but as he read Baky's words about fighting invisible battles and learning to be loud in a world that wanted him quiet, his voice began to crack. When he reached the line about being saved every single day, Ozzy stopped. He covered his face with one hand. His shoulders shook. The Prince of Darkness, the man who had bitten off a bat's head, who had survived decades of chaos and excess, was crying in front of 22,000 people. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't scream. They stood in respectful, awed silence. Many were crying too. "Baky," Ozzy said finally, looking up at the arena, his face streaked with tears. "If you're listening, mate, and I know you are. This next song is for you, for showing an old rocker what courage really looks like. The opening chords of Shot in the Dark filled the arena. But this time, it wasn't just a song. It was a prayer, a battle cry, a love letter from a man who had found his purpose again. 22,000 voices sang along, and for those 4 minutes, every person in that arena was singing for Baky. The next morning, instead of flying to the next tour stop, Ozzy and Sharon drove to Manchester Royal Infirmary. No cameras, no publicity, just a promise to keep. When they walked into the oncology ward, the nursing staff couldn't believe their eyes. Sarah, the nurse who had posted the original tweet, nearly dropped her medication tray. "He's here," she whispered to her colleagues. "Ozzy Osbourne is actually here." Baky's condition had deteriorated overnight. He was unconscious, breathing shallow and labored. His parents sat on either side of his bed, holding his thin hands. Ozzy didn't hesitate. He walked straight to Baky's bedside, pulled up a chair, and sat down. "Baky," he said quietly, taking the boy's hand. "It's Ozzy. I read your letter last night to 22,000 people. They heard every word, mate. They felt what you felt." He placed the original letter back into Baky's palm and closed the boy's fingers around it. "You did something I couldn't do in 50 years of music," Ozzy continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "You reminded people what it means to fight when everything seems hopeless." That's when it happened. Baky's fingers moved, just slightly, but enough to squeeze Ozzy's hand. His eyelids fluttered, his lips parted. In a voice so quiet it was barely a breath, he said one word, "Ozzy." The room froze. Fatima gasped. The doctor who had just entered stood motionless. "That's the first word he's spoken in 3 days," the doctor whispered. Baky's eyes opened for just a moment, long enough to look directly at his hero. A peaceful smile crossed his face before he slipped back into unconsciousness. Ozzy stayed for 2 hours. He didn't say much more. He just held Baky's hand and watched him breathe. When it was time to leave, he leaned down and kissed the boy's forehead. "Thank you, son," he whispered. "You gave me something no one else ever has. You gave me back my soul." Baky died peacefully 4 days later, surrounded by family. His favorite Black Sabbath song, Changes, played softly in the room. He wasn't afraid. He had done what he set out to do. He had been heard. Ozzy called the family personally. He spoke to Fatima for 30 minutes, both of them crying together over the phone. "Your son reminded me why I started singing," Ozzy told her. "Not for the fame or the money, but for kids like him. Kids who need someone to scream for them." The funeral was small, but Ozzy attended. He wore a simple black suit and carried a single white rose. When asked to speak, he stood before the small gathering and said, "I've met millions of fans, but only one ever made me cry." Baky didn't just listen to music. He understood it. He got what it was really for, to give strength to people who feel weak, to give voice to people who feel silenced. He placed his white rose on the casket and said quietly, "Keep being loud, kid." Even from up there. 3 months later, Ozzy released a song called Letter from Manchester. It wasn't promoted by his record label. He simply posted it online with one line, "For the boy who taught me what courage looks like." The song went viral immediately. It became an anthem for anyone fighting their own battles. Cancer patients played it during chemotherapy. Depression sufferers listened to it on their darkest nights. Parents of sick children found comfort in its words. In every interview after that day, Ozzy mentioned Baky. The letter was framed and placed in his home, next to his Grammy Awards and gold records. "That letter saved me," he would say when people asked about it. "That kid reminded me that music isn't about entertainment. It's about survival, because sometimes the loudest voices come from the quietest places. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who look the weakest. And sometimes a dying boy's letter can save the soul of a rock star who thought he was beyond saving." Baky may be gone, but his words still echo in concert halls, in headphones, in hearts around the world. "You saved my life every single day, and in return, he saved Ozzy's."